Hello and welcome to this webcast today. They've let me out of the podcast cage to do a webinar with you. Gavin is otherwise engaged, so I'm standing in for him doing this. And today I've got my good friend with me, David Gray from Vicarius, who is one of the solution architects. And Vicarius is the latest vendor that we've onboarded, someone we're really excited about. David, would you like to just give a quick intro of yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the solution architect with Vicarius. Basically, background, worked in IT security for nigh on 20 years, worked with many technologies, so familiar with the space right across the board.
Awesome, thank you very much. So before we really sort of start to delve into it, just wanted to sort of set the scene for what we're going to be talking about here today. Vicarius is a patch management platform. I've worked with lots and lots of different patch management platforms throughout my long and I'd like to say distinguished, but I'm not sure who would agree with that, but career. But patch management is something that I've always felt quite strongly about, that it's something that everyone should be doing. There's a huge proportion of cyber incidents, cyber breaches, and cyber attacks that go on, and especially in this sort of realm with phishing and stuff like that. The majority of these attackers rely on people having not applied updates, so that they have security flaws and security vulnerabilities that can be exploited in their environment. And Cyber Essentials actually touches upon this, and Cyber Essentials is really where the need for patching is driven from a regulatory perspective in the UK, unless of course you're subject to other things. The controls within Cyber Essentials stipulate that organizations must keep their software up to date. The software must be licensed and still in support so that it's getting regular security fixes. When devices or software is no longer removed, that software is removed. So like, why keep that potential vulnerability in your environment? Remove it and get rid of it out of the environment. And the key one here is that all critical and high importance security updates that are issued by software vendors that you have software for in your environment are patched within 14 days of release. Now, typically 14 days is quite a long time. If you're only doing it manually and you've got lots of things to do, that can be quite a challenge. And that's really where Vicarius comes into its own, because it just provides a sort of hands-off approach to patching and allows you to do that. But I'm just conscious of stealing David's thunder, so I'm gonna pipe down about that. Back in the day when I was an administrator, I was responsible for managing WSUS, so the Windows update, or the sort of maybe old version of Windows Update now, that you use in corporate, and it was really hard work. It was very labor intensive just to go through and approve the different software updates that needed to be applied, and frequently they wouldn't deploy due to dependencies not being there, or you try and deploy a C++ redistributable and you need to update .NET or something like that. So it can become a real problem, and certainly once you get into larger scale estates, and especially where you've got a disparate workforce, you've got people who are working all over the place, and those endpoints may not be directly addressable by your patch solution, it quickly starts to fall down. And that's really where cloud patching has become an essential or a necessity in my eyes. It offers you that flexibility. You can patch on-prem and you can patch off-prem, wherever those devices are. So you've always got peace of mind and confidence that at any given time, your policies and your strategy around patching is being adhered to. And again, David will come on to this, but getting that feedback from whatever patch management solution you're using is important. WSUS used to give you nothing. It would be like, deploy the patches, and a week later, have they been deployed? I don't know. I'll try and deploy them again, or I'll run another patch scan and see how many are left now to actually be pushed out. So it becomes incredibly labor intensive. There's no degree of confidence that you can get from it that it's actually been done. So I mean, certainly in the case where you need to patch something that's really important, or there's a very damaging vulnerability available for people, you need to be getting on with this. So I think I've probably blathered on enough. I can sit here and talk for ages about pain points. Anyone who's tried to do it already knows, so you don't really need me to explain that to you too much. We haven't got time to do it. It's a real challenge to do, and we need a solution that's going to do that for us. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to David and let him talk about his solution.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, so I'll just bring up my screen. I'll just run through a few through a few slides. Basically, what I'll do is talk generally about Vicarius and the solution that we provide, but also more specifically as I go through, I'll call out how we can help address the Cyber Essentials kind of requirements. So Vicarius, just by way of a background, we've been around for 8+ years now, and we're basically, our vision is to be the world's most robust vulnerability remediation platform, and we're going about that through enhancement, through as well as the existing technologies. We're expanding into using AI and community-driven insights as well. Now, really, the primary challenge that we identified and we've seen, and Adam has already alluded to and talked about, is it comes down to numbers, and it's the sheer numbers of vulnerabilities that are being identified every month. I think this slide is actually out of date now. I think we're looking at more than 3,000 vulnerabilities most months just being published. So staying on top of those vulnerabilities and understanding what's relevant to you as an organization, as Adam said, it's nigh on impossible. You simply can't keep track of it. You can't keep track of all of those new vulnerabilities. Are they relevant? Are they not relevant? It's really, really difficult. And then when we start to look at actually remediating and fixing them, it's then the challenge to stay on top and actually get the patches applied. It's not only understanding which patches you need to apply, but then it's having the visibility and understanding, have they been applied, haven't they been applied, where's the gaps. It's staying on top. And I think here we're talking about it being on average 30 days to apply a single critical patch. Now, I personally think that very often it's a lot longer than that. But equally, if we're talking Cyber Essentials, that's double the length of time that you need to be looking at for Cyber Essentials for critical patches. And that's where we do have patches. Very often there aren't patches available, so we need to look at other mechanisms for remediation. So we've got that overall challenge of the numbers, that sheer numbers that we're trying to manage. It's the vulnerabilities, it's how to understand what's relevant, and understanding the patches, both with Microsoft platforms, Apple, Linux, and any third-party applications, and then that remediation and how to deal with them when we don't have the patches available. So in terms of Cyber Essentials, what we're really talking about is there's a few challenges that we need to look at. So the first is understanding what vulnerabilities actually exist. To try and patch them, you have to have the visibility. So you need to understand what vulnerabilities actually exist. So how do you gain visibility into those vulnerabilities? And then we have the challenge of the remediation. So how do we not only make sure that we are applying patches within the 14 days of release, but how do you actually also then provide evidence to say, this is how we're doing it, and here's the evidence that we are doing it. So it's not just about being able to do it, you do need to be able to give that evidence as well. And then with the remediation side of things, we also have the challenges which come down to the more traditional approaches, which come down to typically we have multiple licenses that you will need to use for different products, for patching or for identifying vulnerabilities or for prioritizing. And then, of course, with that, it means that you have to be trained up on multiple products as well. And finally, the visibility, as I was already talking about, it's the reporting. How do you prove that you're remediating? How do you prove that those activities took place and you've fixed those vulnerabilities or remediated the risk? So those are the key things from the Cyber Essentials perspective. And as I've also talked about briefly, we have the challenge, continuing challenge, being not only the different products, but the different teams. So we've got the security team who are identifying the vulnerabilities, and very often it's handed over to the IT teams to say, right, here's a vulnerability, now go fix. We need the means to understand how do we actually go about fixing? And we need the continual kind of view so that the IT team can keep the business running, that we can fix the vulnerabilities, and also so that security can see that those vulnerabilities have been fixed. We want to take away and get away from the toing and froing, the backwards and forwards of the vulnerabilities and the remediation, and simplify the entire kind of process. So again, the products that we're looking at will have traditionally a single product for assessment. We'll have a single product for prioritization, or multiple products, in fact, and multiple products for patching. So we've got the multiple teams, the multiple products, and it's a complex problem when we're looking at the numbers. So what Vicarius did, we took the challenges that we've seen here, and we've bundled it into a single cloud-based package. So what we're doing is we're taking that discovery process where we're looking to identify the vulnerabilities, to understand what are the vulnerabilities, where are they, what's the severity of them. We're then looking to take the next step, which is the prioritization, to understand what's important to you as a customer. How do we understand what's important to us? How do we understand what's not important? So that prioritization process, and then the final step, the remediation process, where we're actually taking the applications and we're starting to look to remediate and fix the problems. So we're looking to apply patches, we're looking to apply configuration changes, we're looking to automate that entire life cycle within a single platform, and automate as far as is possible the entire discovery, prioritization, and remediation life cycle. Now, the way we go about doing this is the platform, VRX, we run an agent. We have an agent that we run on those managed endpoints. We can manage Windows, we can manage Mac, we can manage Linux. So all of those different platforms, we're providing that visibility within the platform. We run the agent. The agent performs an analysis to understand what are the applications that we have running on the managed endpoints. Now, because we understand what applications we're running, that gives us real-time visibility into the vulnerabilities. So if, for example, a new vulnerability is published, we know without rescanning, is that vulnerability applicable and relevant to you, or is it not relevant? So typically, the traditional approach has always been a snapshot. So it's been that point in time. So rather than having that real-time visibility, you would have to run a scan and give you a snapshot as to the vulnerabilities. New vulnerabilities published, you would need to rescan. We're taking that away and giving that real-time visibility into understanding both the vulnerabilities and the remediation in near real time. So this also gives you, of course, a full inventory of the applications within the environment, so you can see all of those applications. So we can see perhaps you may have unauthorized applications, that you have your prescribed list of this is what we're allowed to run within the environment. We're giving the visibility into that entire set of applications, third party as well as the Microsoft applications. And once we have the inventory, that's where, as I say, we start to understand what are the vulnerabilities that are relevant. We can also then start to understand what patches are applicable. So what patches do we have for Microsoft applications, the operating systems, the third-party applications. And we also look for potential zero-day vectors of attack. So we're also looking for unpublished vulnerabilities to potentially identify those other routes that your malware might try to take advantage of, or the malicious actors might try and make use of. So once we have all of this information, we then start to perform the prioritization. So the way we're doing this is we have what's called dynamic contextual prioritization. Now, to do this, what we're doing is we use what's called X tags. And these X tags are looking at how the applications are used and other threat information. So we're looking to understand in a way that's unique to your environment how the application's actually in use. So we're looking to understand, does the application need admin rights? Is it active on the network? Is it frequently used? Do we have known exploited vulnerabilities? Is it end of support? And we're looking at these different contextual pieces of information to generate a risk score. That risk score is designed to go above and beyond the traditional CVSS score, which is a blanket score, same for everybody for each vulnerability, and it's designed to take these contextual pieces of information to ensure that what's more of a risk for you is identified as a higher risk. So the same application that I'm running may be different for Adam, for example. So we take this and apply the risk score. The intent here is really all about the reduction of workload. So rather than looking at the lists of vulnerabilities, the pages and pages of CVEs that you will typically get in an environment, if you have several hundred assets, you will have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of vulnerabilities. Certainly, if you've got thousands of endpoints, you will have tens of thousands of vulnerabilities out there. So we're aiming to take away the requirement to go through those long lists of vulnerabilities and reduce the amount of effort that is needed to understand where the highest risk within the organization actually lies. And that's where the workload reduction that I'm talking about on this slide comes into play, that it's taking a risk-based approach rather than taking each of those vulnerabilities. We do provide information around the vulnerabilities because I know very often people will need to understand, do I have this particular vulnerability in the environment? So we do have that information, and it's certainly available for reporting and all of that kind of good stuff. But the intent, as I say, is to take that risk-based approach. And then the final phase of this is then looking at how we approach the remediation. So we've done the analysis, we know what the vulnerabilities are, we've performed some prioritization. How do we now fix them? So we've got a few different mechanisms here. The first, and I guess the most obvious, and the one that Adam's talked about, certainly in terms of Cyber Essentials, we're talking about patch management. So what we can do is we can do this on a manual basis, or we can do it on an automated basis. And when we're talking about Cyber Essentials, this is really the approach that needs to be taken. It's that automation, it's the ensuring that on a rolling basis that you have your critical and high severity patches that are applied within that 14-day window. So what we can do is we can set up an automation and we can base it around the severity of those patches if needed. And we can set up an automation so that we can focus on the Microsoft Office suite, for example, or your web browsers or your other applications. And we can set it up so that these are running on a rolling basis so that within a defined period of time as per policy, you can apply those patches. And also, because we have the automation set up, it gives the evidence, A, that this is how we do it when it comes to Cyber Essentials, and B, we do have reporting capabilities that give the evidence to show this is when we did it. So you've got that both sides of the coin for managing that. So the patching is obviously critical, and we can automate that fully. Now, we can also manage applications that we potentially don't natively support, and we can, so if we have more niche applications or specialist applications, we can manage those through the scripting approach, so that we can upload files and you can apply your patches for your in-house application. You can apply that through the application through VRX as well. So while obviously the focus is on our library of applications that we do support, which last check was 520 plus for Windows, and Linux is it's a huge number. Mac, we've got a good number that we publish as well. Putting those to one side, we can also manage the more bespoke and more specialist applications and ensure that they are patched within the time windows as well. So we have the automation approach, and with the scripting, as well as the managing those applications, we can also perform configuration changes. So where we have more configuration type vulnerabilities, like the, let's say the log4j vulnerability, we can both detect and remediate those vulnerabilities through the scripting approach. So we've got those other mechanisms for managing the non-application vulnerabilities or application vulnerabilities that aren't fixed through patching. And then the final mechanism that we also have is we have a technology called virtual patching, which from a patching perspective is unique to us at Vicarius, and that will allow, that effectively acts as a bubble around an application. So we've got legacy applications that no longer being supported or no longer have patches, we can actually still put some protection in place for those applications, acting as an API gateway to prevent malicious calls being made to those applications. So we have multiple different processes for that remediation and for managing that. So as I say, just to wrap up, essentially Vicarius, the VRX platform, we're designed to simplify the process and to put it all under one roof, on one pane of glass, the entire life cycle, the analysis, the prioritization, and the remediation phases of managing the patching and reporting on those.
Cool. Thank you very much, David. That was really interesting. I always like listening to you talk about these things. Patching might not be that exciting of a product, but when you hear something that's doing and it's hitting all of the main pain points that I've experienced and I've heard customers talking about, I think that's a pretty powerful message to be able to take. A couple of things that I just wanted to either to pick up on or to just sort of drill into a little bit more is that this is very much a modern patching solution for a modern organization. It's intended to reduce the manpower that's required to stay on top of patching. With the automated piece, hopefully, for most of the time, you set this up, and this has been my experience of working with the Vicarius platform. You set it up, you give it the policies, and you tell it how you want to apply them. You can even defer installation. So that's a favorite thing of mine. We've got 14 days to apply it. I'm actually going to defer it for 4 or 5 days because when Microsoft release a patch, once in a blue moon, there's something wrong with it, and that causes a problem. So I like to delay mine, but it then gives them time to fix whatever the problems are so that it's just plain sailing. But to all intents and purposes, I used to run a report once a week just to make sure that the number of patches weren't getting out of hand, because they come out constantly, so you're never going to be at 0 patches outstanding. But as long as you can keep an eye on it and make sure it's ticking over, then that's all the time that is required in order for you to be patching all of your server and endpoint assets, which is brilliant. Something that's also quite interesting, and there's this cyber risk is something, and risk management is something that I talk a lot about because it's something that we've all been doing for a long time in one form or another, but the threat landscape and the sheer scale of the risks facing organizations from a cyber perspective now is frankly getting out of hand. So it's something that everyone's going to need to start doing is making sure, and this is also going to lead into the cyber insurance conversation that I've been doing podcasts about and stuff like that, is that you need to understand what your cyber risk profile looks like so that you can understand if you've got any serious problems and you can start to do something about them, either to mitigate them or to rectify them and remove them completely. And the fact that you touched upon the vulnerability assessments, and typically they tend to be point-in-time snapshots of what the environment looks like at the time that you ran it. Because of the way that Vicarius works, although it's not a dedicated vulnerability assessment, at any given time, you can look at a fairly up-to-date list of these the current vulnerabilities out there in the wild and this is what it looks like in your environment, where these ones are present. And from a risk perspective, that means that it's almost an instantaneous snapshot at any given time without you having to say, oh, but now we're doing a vulnerability assessment. And because it's all being done dynamically, we're not suddenly dumping a load of traffic on the network to do an endpoint scan once a day sort of thing. This stuff is all just trickling in all of the time. It means that you've also kind of got a vulnerability assessment tool built in with this, but with vulnerabilities that you've actually got a single pane of glass actionable route to say, I've got that vulnerability, now I want to remediate it all in one platform, which I think is fantastic from a risk perspective. One of the things that I meant to touch upon at the start, and you mentioned it with the number of different software vendors that Vicarius has a partnership with to develop their deployment methodologies and so on and so forth. And that is, for administrators, one of the things that, and this kind of, it's fairly obvious when you say it, but when we talk about patching, administrators don't tend to think about patching the little applications and utilities that they might have installed on their PC. And by this, I'm talking about Notepad++, Putty, I forget, FileZilla, and things like that, things that you would use once in a while. And some of these things may even have auto update functionality built in, but they will only check for the update when you run them. So if you don't run it for 3 months and you're not having something else looking for it, you could potentially have software that's vulnerable with exploits present in it on your admin PC, where there's more than likely going to be a lot of useful information that an attacker would really love to get access and be able to run an exploit on that. And the fact that you've got this sheer wealth of different products, and this is when I've been evaluating different patch management solutions, typically when you start to look at the cloud solutions, yes, they give you that reach to be able to patch stuff wherever it is, but it tends to be quite limited in what they can patch. And that's one of the reasons I like Vicarius so much, is we get the best of both worlds. We get that flexibility of being able to patch wherever something is, but we're also being really sort of thorough with regards to what we're patching. I think that's probably really about all the time that we've got time for. Thank you very much for taking the time here today. I hope that those of you watching found this informative. It's a brilliant package. It's a brilliant software platform. Do I recall correctly in that we have an MSP offering for this as well that's in development?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
So there you go. So it's, come and talk to us. We Vicarius offer a 14-day free proof of value install. I haven't just spoken out of turn there, have I, Dave?
No, absolutely. We've got more than welcome to proof of concept. Yeah.
So we can get you set up with that 14-day free trial, and so you can see it running in your environment on a small sample of your endpoints. But that will really help you. And certainly, if there's any Cyber Essentials Plus customers out there, I'm sure that you will have experienced the anxiety and trepidation around when it comes time to do the Cyber Essentials Plus audit, and you have that vulnerability run by an auditor or an assessor in your environment. It's always a bit nerve-wracking. Are they going to find anything and stuff like that? If you're running Vicarius, it takes that anxiety, and that, if they find anything, chances are it's something that's going to be really easy to remediate, because you're already doing everything else that's being there. So yeah, and we're here to help. Contact your CyberLab account manager. There'll be a get in contact button below this webinar. So yeah, please do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.